In this position in 1949, Grandmaster F.M. Gellar creates an absolutely incredible endgame brilliancy that features what could easily be debated as the greatest single chess move of all time. Let's see what happens here. So in the game we have a rook endgame and the material is equal, and Gellar continues with pawn to a4. And after a trade of pawns, he now has this passed pawn on a4 that is very close to promoting to a queen. And the problem with White's position is that this rook on g4 is stuck and can't help stopping this passed pawn. But White comes up with a very clever idea. They play pawn to f4, now sacrificing the e4 pawn with the idea to play king to d3, now attacking the rook. And the thing is, if you simply move the rook with rook to e1, then there's f takes e5 with check, and then he can pick up the a4 pawn, and this would be a draw. And you might try to be clever here with black and leave the rook hanging and play pawn to a3, because if you take the rook, we can simply promote to a queen. But if you play pawn to a3, White's idea was f takes e5 with check, and this forces the rook to take, where White can now play rook to a4, stopping the pawn from promoting, and this would be a draw. So after king to d3, what do you do here as black to win the game? Well, there's actually only one winning move here. And over 70 years later, computers still do not see this move at all, because it's probably the most counterintuitive winning move I've ever seen. If you want to play like Gellar, you play the ridiculous king g7. Not only sacrificing his rook, but also moving your king away from the action. But the point of this move is to sidestep f takes e5 with check. And now we can sacrifice the rook, because if you take the rook, we just play pawn to a3 and promote the pawn, and now that f takes e5 does not come with check, the rook cannot get behind the passed pawn. So you cannot take this rook, or else we're getting a queen into the game. So White instead plays pawn to h5, now potentially trying to evacuate the rook to get behind the passed pawn with rook to h1. But we simply play pawn to a3. And if you continue with rook to h4 and don't capture this rook, then black is just going to play rook to a4, get behind the pawn, and defend, and black would be completely winning. So after pawn to a3, White just captures the rook. But now pawn to a2. And after a trade of pawns, there's no defense against the queen. And after we get a queen into the game, the opponent eventually resigns the game.